Good evening, Democrats, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Meet the Candidates. I'm Lauren Calmet, Political Director here at the Florida Democratic Party. Tonight's episode will be featuring some of our wonderful candidates from Northeast Florida. We are incredibly excited to introduce to you these dedicated Democrats who are ready to flip Florida blue. Without further ado, let's meet tonight's candidates. Tonight, we will be featuring Nicole Hamm for Jacksonville City Council, Joshua Hicks running for House District 11, and Heather Hunter running for Senate District 7. All right, and let's start off with Nicole. She is a Jacksonville native committed to doing what's right for the city, families, and community. As an accountant and servant leader, Nicole will ensure that all voices are heard in City Hall and will work responsibly with our tax dollars to fulfill the needs of Jacksonville. Nicole, why don't you share with us a little bit about why you're running?
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I am running to make sure that our community in Jacksonville is placed first in City Hall. I want to make sure that we are listening to our residents and making sure that we are filling their needs in our communities. I aim to make sure that we are transparent, accountable, and supportive of our community. And I look forward to being yours in public service.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Next up, why don't we bring up Joshua Hicks? He is also a native Floridian, and he has given back to his community as a nonprofit professional by spending his career empowering young people, protecting the environment, and expanding access to healthcare. Joshua is running for Florida State House District 11, which covers parts of Duval County and all of Nassau County, to give the people a voice again in Tallahassee. So Joshua, in District 11, your district is a coastal community that is especially at risk of the impacts of sea level rise and climate change. So Josh, how do you plan to address this in the Florida legislature?
Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And hello, everybody. Our First Coast community is considered by some a paradise, and that paradise is in danger. Due to climate change and sea level rise, our beaches, our coastal communities, and our way of life here on the First Coast are threatened if we do not act on climate. So to state it plainly, I believe in science, and climate change is real, and we need to act. We need to begin implementing climate resilience plans today, and we need to stop the short-term thinking and think long-term about a solution. That's why I'm running for the State House. The most important thing we can do to address sea level rise and sea level levels are to stop the root cause, and that's climate change. That means we need to drastically reduce carbon emissions over the next few years. That means offering tax incentives to farmers to reduce their carbon output and investing in low carbon forms of energy like solar here in the Sunshine State, and investing in projects like dune restoration and integrating climate preparedness into our development plans. But the point is we need to act now, and we need leaders in the State House and the State Senate who will act now. I'll work with environmental leaders to protect our beaches, our coastal waterways, and our state and local parks from overdevelopment and fight against any attempt at reducing environmental regulations. I'll also stand up to any attempt to override local, city, or county environmental decisions because they know best. And while my opponent likes to give the climate a vote or two here and there, he votes overwhelmingly against climate science, and that's why he's gotten a D rating from the Florida Environmental Caucus here in Florida. So I'm going to act on sea level rise, and I'm ready to get to work.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Joshua, for sharing that with us. And we certainly need elected officials, especially in Florida, who believe in climate change. And the funny thing is, it's silly to even say believe, because the science is extremely conclusive. So I should have said candidates and elected officials who understand climate change, because that's the real question, is how much do our folks understand it? But next, I will turn to a friend of mine who definitely understands this. Heather Hunter is a 22-year-old progressive Democrat running for Florida State Senate in District 7. She was born and raised in Volusia County and is a graduate of Flagler College in St. Augustine. Heather, this next question is for you. We have heard that your campaign has been centered around unemployment, healthcare, and of course the environment. Can you share with us your solution to these issues in your community?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. Obviously, these three issues are something that has become more prevalent this year, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why I wanted to focus them on my campaign and just spotlight, the lack of response from our leaders in government. And so for unemployment, I think that we have created a failed system, our unemployment system, and we need to work towards fixing that so that we can get our Floridians the help that they need. We need to double weekly benefit caps to $550, double benefit longevity back to 26 weeks. We need to require the FDEO to report the number of Floridians that it has failed to reach so that we can all be in on that process and know where we're at. On the subject of healthcare, the COVID-19 pandemic is still very prevalent, and people have not gotten the medical attention that they need because they can't afford it. So I think we need to expand Medicaid to give over 800,000 people health insurance. I'd like to go further and build towards Medicare for all, so we can, so every Floridian has health insurance, as it is a human right, in my opinion. And on the subject of the environment, my district is a large area where the environment will be impacting it, as well as the rest of Florida. Sea level rise, just so much going on. So we need to prepare Florida's coastal communities and environment from sea level rise. We need to develop a plan for 100% clean renewable energy, invest in solar and wind power, and so much more if we want to save the state of Florida.
Fabulous. Thank you, Heather. And, I think that one thing that you really touched upon is just incredibly true and has continued to come up on these Meet the Candidates episodes, which is that our existing problems that Democrats have been fighting for, these issues that we've been talking about forever, are not only exacerbated and even more center stage because of the COVID-19 health crisis. It's just being magnified. And these are a lot of the issues that we're talking about right now because of COVID-19 have been existing in our communities, and Democrats have been working to try and fix these issues. And, we just haven't had a lot of movement, particularly here in Florida, because the Republicans have been in control for 20 years. So thank you for sharing your priorities with us and your vision for Florida and your district specifically. Nicole, let's go back to you. Why don't you share with us some of your priorities and plans that you have for Jacksonville?
Absolutely. So I have three main plans that I want to see enacted. Our community development and a particular investment in our infrastructure. I plan to enact a 5-year infrastructure plan to expand upon the capital improvement plan that has already been passed by the mayor's office, and make sure that the south side of town and other parts of town get what they deserve as far as city support and infrastructure. I think that we have all been over that one pothole that's been in our neighborhood for a very long time. We've seen the storm drains that are almost inoperable, and particularly on the south side of town, we have had almost like moats drained in certain neighborhoods that are not draining. There's stagnant water with mosquitoes. A small child could drown. And that's just unacceptable. It doesn't help our community. It doesn't help people that are looking to move into our community. So we have to invest, and we have to make sure that those things get done. I also want to empower our economy and get people back to work and supporting our small businesses. One thing that I absolutely love about my district in particular is the corridor of small businesses. You can get all types of food, shopping, groceries, anything you name it, from your local business. And keeping our dollar in the community not only empowers us as a city, but empowers us to create and communicate and work collaboratively. I want to see that our local business is thriving and not in competition with big malls and major super centers, because they can stand on their own. As we've seen in COVID-19, the unemployment and the businesses that have been struggling, and we want to get people back to work. We want to get people able to get back up on their feet and really provide the community with what they're up to. And they're up to some amazing things in Jacksonville. I also believe in transparency and accountability. I want to be accessible to all of Jacksonville, particularly my district. And I want to make sure that I'm in communication about what we're talking about in City Hall and break that down to what that means, and also get community feedback and collaboration. I think that two heads are always better than one. And the more thoughts and community that we have, the better our solutions are going to be to sustain Jacksonville in the future. I also believe in being equitable and equitable. We need to make sure that we are protecting all women, all humans, all workers. Everyone has a fundamental right to exist in this city, and we need to protect and serve all of them, no matter what they look like, who they are, or what they do. I think that it is so important that we have a community that sees diversity and inclusion as a fundamental pinpoint in our leadership, and that's what I want to bring to City Hall.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing that with us. And speaking about diversity and folks who come from different backgrounds, I'd like to go back to Joshua Hicks. He is an openly gay candidate and potentially the first openly gay state legislator from Northeast Florida. So Joshua, how has that impacted your race in District 11?
Well, in a way it has and it hasn't. I'm running as Joshua Hicks, a Democrat who will work with anyone to place our community and our families first. When I entered this race, some people asked if I was scared since my district includes Ruby Red Nassau. And I said, no, it's a challenge and one that I was excited to take on. And I am excited to take it on. You see, many people want the same thing. We all want quality healthcare. We want good public schools for our children. We want a fair wage, and we want a sense of knowing that their leaders, our leaders, will place their families first. So it's important as a candidate that I get this message out into the rural communities and show them that just because I'm gay, I'm not the boogeyman. And the response has been fantastic. I have Democrats, independents, and yes, a great deal of Republicans supporting my candidacy because they know I will place them first in every decision that I make. Now, it would obviously be an honor to be that first openly gay state representative from Northeast Florida. And I have been honored to be endorsed by the Human Rights Campaign, the LGBT Victory Fund, Equality Florida, the Florida LGBTQ plus Democratic Caucus, Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, and of course, our former president, Barack Obama. And these organizations and people champion equality and fairness in everything that they do. So it's an honor to be endorsed by all of them. And I believe that we need to achieve full equality for all people. And when we do, until we do, our work is not done. That's why I'll be a leader who lifts up our community. Every person, no matter who they are, what they look like, or who they love. I'll promote LGBTQ plus equality, fight for an end to systemic racism, and work to end workplace discrimination, no matter your sex, race, or sexual orientation. We must work together to end discrimination in all forms, and I'll be that champion for equality in the state legislature. So you compare me to my opponent. My opponent, on the other hand, is a complete opposite. He's anti-LGBT, he's anti-women's rights, and has no interest in addressing systemic racism. In fact, yesterday, recent news has surfaced that he's okay with being associated with Proud Boys and white supremacy. And in May, he was seen on a boat with a QAnon flag, which he has not disavowed. And during the civil rights protest against police brutality, he was absent, hasn't made a statement, and instead is taking boat rides in support of Donald Trump with Confederate flags. Those aren't the right priorities for District 11. Those aren't the right priorities for equality and fairness for all. That's no leader. My opponent has no place in being in Tallahassee. I will promote equality and fairness for all, and I'm looking forward to promoting that agenda in Tallahassee starting November 4th.
Thank you, Joshua. And of course, we would love to have you up in Tallahassee with us. Next, and you did mention a number of really wonderful endorsements that you have some really incredible groups, including our own caucus through the FDP. Incredible folks. That's actually also how I met Heather Hunter, was through one of our caucuses. So truly some of the best people are involved in those groups. And Heather, while Joshua was talking about his opponent, I wanted to follow up with you on that note as well. So of course your opponent has attacked you for being supposedly unqualified. Would you like to correct the record?
Yeah, of course. I think I can relate to Joshua Hicks a lot with our opponents being not the most available to their constituents. And I think I can do the job better. And I think I have done the job better these past 6 months. And of course, I'm young, and I know that's the first thing people look at when they see me. They see me as a 22-year-old who doesn't have any experience. But I think from my time in college, I've been able to garner a lot of experience. I was a Florida college Democrat. That led me to a great amount of other Democrats who got me involved in the executive board, becoming the president of the Florida College Democrats, going to Tallahassee, working with the Democratic Environmental Caucus, working with the Florida's Democratic Party with you, Lauren, I think that, as well as working with my local DEC in my community, has shown that I am more dedicated to this community. I may not know all the ins and outs of the legislature, but that's something that I am willing to learn, and I will learn as soon as I'm elected. And I think I have shown that I am for the community. I've been inside the community. I've listened to the community, and I will continue to be dedicated to the community when I'm elected.
Thank you so much, Heather, for sharing your vision. Nicole, let's go back to you, and let's talk about a little bit about when you are elected. What would be the first thing that you would do when elected to City Council?
The first thing that I would do is enact a 5-year infrastructure plan. This city has been lacking a sustainable infrastructure program throughout the city, and it's becoming extremely prevalent in District 4. And what we're starting to see, as Josh mentioned, our sea levels rising, and we have beautiful waterways and rivers, and people are filing insurance claims for flooding monthly, and all of these other things. So I want to create an infrastructure plan that supports our community rather than scare them away. I don't want them going down the street or to a different county just because things seem better on the other side. They deserve it right here in their own backyard, and that's what I'm going to bring to them. I want to make sure that we probably won't get to every single sidewalk, but we can make sure that those storm drains are safe in the middle of hurricane season. We should make sure that that small business doesn't have to close because it doesn't have the proper drainage to operate. We just want to make sure that we're able to take care of our community and our people. I think the last thing that we ever want to see is a young child on the news that is drowned or has been misplaced or anything of the sort due to just a small infraction in our infrastructure. It truly does matter, and it goes such a long way to not only bringing people here, but keeping people here. And as we grow and as we develop and flip Florida blue, we want to have more people, more positivity, and more progress. And to do that, we have to start right here and investing in our infrastructure and making sure that we have a plan that builds a bench for our next generations to come.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And before we wrap up this group, I do want to bring up one topic, which has been one of the hottest topics in the Florida legislature and sadly continues to be in our news cycle, and that is gun safety. So Joshua, let's turn to you for this final question. Your opponent has received an A+ rating from the NRA and is backed and supported by gun groups across Florida. So how has this impacted your race, and what is your stance on gun safety in District 11?
That's a great question. And, he's received an A rating from the NRA, and he's backed and paid for by the NRA. And I'm proud to announce that I've received an F rating from the NRA. I've been endorsed by the Brady, Florida, the Pride Fund in Gun Violence, and received the Candidate Gun Sense distinction from Moms Demand Action. Listen, Republicans like my opponent love to say Democrats will take away your guns. That's nonsense. I'm from North Florida, and my family and I have gone hunting for sport. We've gone recreational shooting. And you know what? We're all responsible adults when it comes to holding and using guns and locking them up. I support the Second Amendment, period. But I will also vote to protect our children and community from senseless gun violence. That includes supporting universal background checks, which are supported by 85% of all Americans, regardless of party. It includes keeping guns out of our classrooms so that teachers can teach and not have to worry about how to handle a gun. It means defending and strengthening our red flag laws here in Florida. And it means keeping weapons of war off our streets. We can and we should pass sensible gun laws because it will keep our families and it'll keep our communities safe. And while my opponent prides himself on being called the Florida gun lawyer, literally his website is floridagunlawyer.com. When the legislature passed bipartisan legislation a few years ago after school shootings to address gun violence, my opponent voted no. There hasn't been a Second Amendment case that my opponent would say no to. I believe we can and we should pass common sense gun laws. I believe we can and should have a moral responsibility to keep our families and communities safe. And I believe we can do all of that while still upholding the Second Amendment for those who want their guns.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joshua, for your answer. And that certainly closes out our incredible first group. Thank you so much to each of you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have another 4 incredible candidates. We have Kimberly Duggar running for House District 19, Captain Adam Morley running for House District 24, Ben Marcus running for House District 16, and Jimmy Midyette for Duval County Clerk. Let's bring up our candidates. Excellent. Well, it's so great to see our candidates. Why don't we start off with Ben Marcus? He is a devoted husband and father, a small business owner, and a committed community advocate. As a national service alum with the AmeriCorps program and community volunteer, Ben understands just how much can be accomplished when we all work together. So, Ben, this first question is for you. Jacksonville is facing billions of dollars worth of critical infrastructure and resiliency spending to prepare for sea level rise. What would you do as a state legislator to address this issue?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lauren, and hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is a really critical issue that we need to address as a state on the whole. We've already heard about infrastructure spoken about from a number of other candidates. Jacksonville, as Lauren mentioned, is truly facing billions of dollars worth of costs associated with getting us ready for sea level rise. This isn't an issue where we can be really screwing around. And the fact of the matter is the city doesn't have the funds by itself to handle this issue. And so a big part of what I want to do when I get to Tallahassee is find a solution, a dedicated revenue stream for the essential infrastructure projects that we have to deal with, whether it be sea level, whether it be building seawalls, developing natural flood mitigation areas, dealing with the crazy flooding and drainage issues that we see all over our city, or getting septic tanks out of the ground. These are essential projects that we have to get done now. These also can provide hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs if done correctly. And a unified strategy can really help preserve as much public and private property as possible. So I am committed to this issue. It's a huge issue for not just my district, but across the entire city, and obviously multiple communities across the country, and across the state in particular. And so it's something I really want to focus on.
Thank you so much. I'd next up like to turn to Dr. Duggar, who's also running for the state legislature, to dive back into a hot topic that we've discussed that we continue to see both in the news and in the legislature. But first, I'll go ahead and introduce this candidate. She is running for House District 19 because of the recent pandemic and deaths of innocent citizens. She calls this a wake-up call and says that America is at a crossroads. She is a retired school principal and a problem solver, and she has certainly got the plans and energy necessary to bring leadership to her district. So, Dr. Duggar, considering the recent deaths of unarmed citizens across the nation, as well as continued discrimination at many levels, what tangible actions can individual communities take to heal the situation that has existed for far too many years?
Thank you, Lauren. On the sidewalk of where George Floyd was murdered is written, "If you can't breathe, neither can I." And that really captures the essence of my candidacy. Bringing people together. We need equity. We need to realize that if one person suffers, another person suffers. And we've been for way too long, people being selfish and not thinking about not thinking about other people. We have to bring together communities, and I have a plan to establish community organizations representative of the community with law enforcement, city and county commissions, lay people, young people. We have some wonderful young people in my district that are very active, and starting to heal, come up with some goals and actually really follow through, meet quarterly, be transparent, come up with some very realistic goals of how we can bring our communities together. And we have a lot of disparity among my district, which includes Putnam and South Clay and Bradford and Union. So I want to bring those people together. That's what I did as a school principal. I went into troubled schools and brought people together by empowering people, stretching people's talents, and making positive changes. And change has to be a comprehensive effort. It's not just words. It's something that we really have to monitor all the time. And I called it mining the program. M starts for modeling. You have to model it. And the I stands for integrate. You have to integrate that change in everything you do. And the N stands for notable. You have to notice people in your community that are doing great things. And of course, the E stands for evaluate. You have to evaluate your program. It has to be something comprehensive, not just something that starts and nobody knows who it is. In the community, you can put, let's just say, you want to call it We Care. It's a whole program for the whole community. Everybody knows what it is, just like a school mantra that says failure is not an option. Everybody knows what it is. So I have a clear plan to do that, and that's what I want to do in District 19.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duggar. And of course, leadership is, we really need great leadership at every level of government, from municipal to in the state legislature, congressional, and of course in the White House. But as we're having conversations about folks who are running at different levels and what their priorities are, and then what lawmaking actually looks like, one term keeps coming up over and over again, which is home rule. So Captain Adam Morley, he's running for the state legislature. I'd like to turn this next question to him. So before we dive in, for our viewers who are unfamiliar with this term, home rule is defined as the transfer of authority over municipal matters from state laws to local charter that is drafted, adopted, and amended by the voters. So Captain Morley, where do you stand on this issue? And if you support it, what are your plans to restore power to the people?
So yes, I'm a huge advocate for home rule because many times I have seen well-informed, educated citizens organize, rally around issues, go down to their city or local government and lobby their local officials for change, only for them to be denied because Tallahassee has passed these preemption laws that remove home rule, remove the local control over local issues, and put it in the hands of Tallahassee. They think they know what's best for us on these issues, and I don't agree with that. I think that those here locally who are well informed on these issues should be able to have a voice. Currently, we have seen lots of these preemption laws passed over the last several years, and I'd like to get to Tallahassee to kind of put a stop to that, bring home rule back to the communities so that people don't have to take time off of work. They don't have to get busloads of people to go out to Tallahassee just to be ignored while trying to change a state law. They should be able to lobby and advocate at the local level, get those local ordinances in place. If they work as well as they hope, other communities can adopt them. And once enough communities adopt them throughout the state, that's when the state should be like, this is where we step in and pass a uniform rule that helps everybody, since the majority of the communities have adopted these ordinances. I believe more in the local level, spreading upwards rather than this top-down legislation that we're currently getting. So protection and restoration of home rule is one of the key issues I'm running on.
Thank you so much. And while we're having this conversation, why don't we bring up one of our candidates who is running at the local level? Jimmy Midyette is a career legal aid and civil rights lawyer from Jacksonville and has fought for LGBTQ rights and voting rights throughout his career. And now he's running to be the Duval County Clerk of Court. So Jimmy, please talk to us a little bit about an issue that I know has been happening specifically in Duval County, which is that Duval County stopped all weddings in 2015 in response to marriage equality in Florida. So what is your plan to restore civil marriage to the Duval County Courthouse?
Well, Lauren, thank you for having me. I appreciate that question. What we noticed when 2015 rolled around and we had marriage equality finally as the law of the land in Florida was that our clerk in this part of the state, many of them actually, stopped all civil weddings in the courthouse. They went ahead and completed marriage applications as they were required to do by statute, but they stopped the civil ceremonies. And so my opponent has actually said that he will continue to have that prohibition against civil ceremonies in the courthouse, which I know for people watching around Florida, that must sound like, you know, a time warp back to the 80s or something, because other places don't have that problem. But here in Jacksonville, we tend to do things a little differently and on our own time scale. But what I've said, and I'll say again, is that on the very first day that I'm in office, that'll be January 3rd, 2021, I will reopen the wedding arbor in the Duval County Courthouse. Even if I have to conduct every wedding myself as the clerk of court, I will do it because it's that important. Every person who enters the clerk's office or the courthouse in Duval County should be treated with dignity and respect. And that includes the LGBTQ community as well.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for standing up for our values. Also, I'll go ahead and dive into another issue that hasn't just come up in the Jacksonville area, but is a problem statewide. Public school funding has been a topic of urgency in Florida for quite some time now. Jacksonville in particular has some of the oldest buildings in the state and has seen dramatic increases in charter school openings and enrollment. So let's turn to Ben Marcus for this next question. What should the state legislature's role what should the state legislature's role be to ensure that every public school student has access to high quality education?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And it is true. And we are trying to address here locally the issue of the oldest school buildings. On the ballot this year in Duval County will be an option to utilize the half-cent sales tax that's available to every school district around the state to address these kind of infrastructure needs. And it looks like it's on track to passing here locally, which is fantastic. It's going to mean thousands and thousands of jobs for a significant amount of time. There's so much work to be done here. And not just the children, but the people inside of those facilities who serve our kids every single day deserve a safe, clean, modern place to work and to spend their time. The legislature, for a variety of reasons, and we can, take much longer to get into every single one of those. But for the past 20 years, especially, the state legislature has really been messing around with the funding formulas dictating how much money the school districts have to spend, piling on additional mandates without any sort of additional funding, and really getting in the way of public school districts to best address the needs of the students there. In addition, a lot of these folks have taken significant amount of money from private companies that manage charter schools, which have really tipped the scales in a lot of ways in terms of how the policy is designed and the kind of exceptions that these schools get to rules that public schools have to follow. So I'm very much dedicated to leveling the playing field and making sure that our public schools have access to the resources they need to really provide that high quality education that every child in the state is guaranteed under our Constitution.
Thank you so much, Ben. And of course, we cannot be talking about education without turning it to Dr. Duggar. So Dr. Duggar, there is a great performance disparity among public schools across our nation, especially among race. So with many years of research on quality schools, how can we bridge the gap so that all students can succeed?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm sure you've heard of the school to prison pipeline, Lauren. It's a shame that term even exists. And I will tell you that I saw that for 35 years. I, as a principal for 30 years, and the last 5 years of my career, I went out to Florida State Prison as an education supervisor, helping inmates earn their GEDs. We have 95,000 plus inmates out there, and a lot of them under mandatory sentencing guidelines. And that's another topic I know that we're not on right now. But I have seen the whole gamut. I've seen mainly boys of color in elementary school be allowed to put their heads down, not steered towards rigorous courses when they're very capable. We know, and I'm not a proponent of charter schools. I was a public school teacher. I love public school teachers. They're on the firing line, and I have to say, and this might not be very popular, but I've seen the richest schools not do the best jobs, and I've seen Title I schools do a fantastic job. And I'll give you a real quick example. Years ago, when they started networking schools and creating these labs with state of the art, of course, computers change all the time, but with all these computers, some of these teachers would drop off the kids for an hour, pick them back up, and go back to the class and not do a thing with it. Other schools would say, okay, what did you learn today? This is what we did in that lab. I know that's kind of a simple example, but it goes down to the teacher. It's really not the money, it is the teacher. And I am a big proponent of salary increases for teachers because there's no substitute for a great teacher ever. But these boys mainly, and girls, but I've seen it with mostly boys, we do not steer them towards rigorous courses. And we know that discipline problems are directly related to academic success. And most of these kids that start getting in trouble, it's because they're not succeeding academically. And that pattern just starts rolling, and then they get identified as, that school to prison pipeline. And unfortunately, it is heartbreaking. And their favorite day they look forward to is their 16th birthday so they can drop out. So we give up on these kids. And key education is the key. And you can probably tell I'm really excited about improving our schools. We need to make them the best places these kids go to. And of course, it's been a challenge this past year with these kids, even with some of these kids in virtual school. There's been different levels of performance. Some of the teachers have gone to those houses. They're doing a fantastic job, and others are, just kind of fledgling. So I'm hoping that we will be able to go into schools, recognize what is wrong with them. I used to work for the Southern Association of Secondary Schools, where we accredited schools, and you could go in and pretty much pinpoint what was wrong with the schools. And basically, they just need help. They need a lot of training. The best schools have ongoing professional development. So to summarize that, we know what quality schools are. Ever since Harry Wong wrote the book, years ago, I think in 1984, The Best Schools, it hasn't changed. But for some reason, we let these schools, when we let these kids down, and the graduation rate has complicated things where, some kids are allowed to go to homeschool towards the end so they can get, counted in the graduation rate. And basically, there's a lot of things we can do to improve schools, and I plan to do that in our district. And thank you for that great question. I appreciate the opportunity to answer it.
Thank you so much for everyone on the call. When I say that, our heart really goes out to all of the educators and students who are now learning and teaching virtually. I just can't even imagine how it already makes a very difficult job just that much harder. So speaking of homes and being in the home, I'd like to turn to Captain Adam Morley to address another continuous issue. So whether residents rent or own their homes, affordable housing is one of the main issues on everybody's mind. So Captain Morley, let's turn to you. What are your main plans for making sure that citizens can afford to live in the cities in District 24?
Thank you for that question. So what I've noticed as a lifelong resident of my district is that my peers are having to move out of the area because they can no longer afford to live here. And that's because here in District 24, we have beautiful beaches, we have waterways, we have the city of St. Augustine just to the north of us, Flagler Beach. We are a destination community. And what we're noticing is that we have these investment companies that are coming in and they're buying up all of the available single family homes in the area just to turn around and turn them into short-term rentals. So that's driving the prices higher because they can make more in a week or two rental than they can for long-term rentals is their business model. And it's also impacting the character of the quiet residential neighborhoods that these houses are being purchased in. So I would like to see something done to address the amount of single-family homes that these investment companies can purchase to turn into commercial properties in residential neighborhoods. And then if we could keep the cost of living down by doing other things, such as allowing for renewable energy to come into the district or come into the state through PPE, third-party power agreements, that we're one of two states that doesn't allow this, so that we can allow for the cost of living to stay low. But one of the big things is these short-term short-term rentals that are driving up costs. I have friends that had to move out of the house that they were renting for years because it sold to an investment company that turned it into a short-term rental, and there's no available housing for these folks. And so they're having to move out of the area and come back to work here.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I'll piggyback off of that with another top concern, which is affordable energy. So what is your energy policy, and how do you propose to bring competition into our energy markets, and how would this lower costs for our consumers?
Well, I love that question, because I'm going to give a kind of an unpopular answer, and that's the free market. What we know about the free market is when you have competition, it's going to drive costs down, and it's going to push innovation. Right now, we have state-sanctioned monopolies. I only get to use FPL in my region, which means that I'm paying FPL. They're taking my money, and then they're going and investing in fracking in other states. I don't like that. I would like consumer choice. I would like to be able to choose who my power provider is and vote with my dollar. I do believe that there are enough Florida residents that would choose the cleaner, safer, more sustainable power alternative if they had the choice. We don't currently have that choice. So I'd like to kind of break up the utility monopolies that currently run the state and have entirely too much power over our legislature as it is.
Thank you so much for that answer. Next, let's turn back to Jimmy, who certainly, as I had stated earlier, has quite an interesting legal career. Jimmy, you were an attorney on the team that sued Florida Republicans over roadblocks to returning citizens voting. So how does that relate to your campaign for clerk?
It's interesting. As part of that litigation, I was able to work in discovery and other facets of litigation with some of the clerks of court around the state. And I was impressed by the way that many clerks were handling learning about and making available to returning citizens information about their legal fees and fines and obligations. So what I learned through that process is that there are some really great gold standard ways that clerks can help people to get their information together so that they can be restored to their right to vote. Unfortunately, in Duval County, there have been no special programs put in place to help gather that information and make it easier for formerly incarcerated people to get their rights back. And as we watch the federal litigation continue, and we see some of the great work being done by groups such as the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition and others to gather donors to help pay for those things, to help people get those rights back together, or get those rights back. It's really critical that the clerks of court present clear and accurate data about these fines and fees so that they can be cleared off the books and we can make returning citizens into voting citizens. So that's one of the big things that I'm going to be working on very closely with the community groups that are doing it, with the state attorney's office, with the public defender, to make sure that people who are able to get their rights back do so, and they do so without any undue delay or additional roadblocks like we've seen.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's turn back to Ben Marcus, who of course is running for the state legislature, and I'll bring up a topic that has come up on many of these episodes, which is corporate special interests have become increasingly engaged in public policy in Florida over the past couple decades. So Ben, what impact has that had on what needs to be done, in your opinion, to make sure that the people of Florida are not undercut in policy conversations?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question, and certainly relevant to almost any public policy conversation that we have in the state right now. Unfortunately, my opponent is one of these folks that just takes globs of money from these big corporate special interests and then just carries their water through Tallahassee, and it's incredibly it's incredibly unacceptable in my opinion to have folks who are elected to represent single member districts, geographically defined areas. In this district, it's 130,000 registered voters, right? And even more people who are living here, that you are chosen to go represent in Tallahassee. And for these folks to be spending all their time representing folks who not even dealing with the issues that exist in our district, let alone taking ridiculous amounts of money and wasting all our time in these issues, it's just a big waste of, like I said, it's a big waste of everybody's time. I can point to a number of very specific examples. I think one that a lot of people aren't aware of is telecoms, big telecoms influence in Tallahassee in particular. They were able to push through legislation which basically forces local communities to subsidize their installation of 5G technology, and really writes out local communities from anything having to do with the zoning of the installation of that technology. This is the kind of situation which is just, again, unacceptable. It really goes against home rule, which other candidates have mentioned. It's also an issue in my campaign as well. It ranges at pharmaceuticals, private prisons, big oil. We now have fracking going on in our state. It's just an insane situation that we can't, it's just unsustainable. We see the governor giving away $540 million to major corporations, and then offering a paltry pot of $30 million for loans to small businesses. We had something like 12,000 applicants for that money. They're just trying to stay afloat. They're trying to keep their employees on payroll in the middle of a pandemic. And it's just completely ridiculous. And, I'm a big believer in fiscal responsibility. And for me, what that means is making sure that we are funding the most essential programs before we're just returning money to folks who basically don't need it and are just taking advantage of our system. So it's a huge issue for me. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that basically lock up a lot of votes before anybody even has a chance to debate them or get input from their constituents. So it's definitely something I'm very much looking forward to tackling when I'm elected in November.
Thank you so much, Ben. And let's continue this conversation about public trust. Jimmy, you've campaigned on cleaning up Jacksonville's politics by taking on Republican Mayor Curry's political team. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, unfortunately, there's this toxic atmosphere in Jacksonville now, with some of the political players that just have campaigned in a very ugly way. That's new to Jacksonville. We didn't have that before 2015, and they've gone very consistently and maybe even with a plan from city council, the mayor's office, and now they seem to be trying to get control of the courthouse, and that's what we're really up against in Jacksonville. We don't want to have these kind of shadowy special interests who control industries to get their hands on the courthouse. What happened recently in Jacksonville, where they tried to sell our public utility JEA out from under us to benefit fat cats and supporters of that particular political machine, is really what we're again up against. And we just want to draw the line in the sand this year, right now, in this campaign, to say no more. This is not how we operate the levers of government in Jacksonville. We do not want to have our public resources taken away from us and privatized and transferred away. We do not want corrupting influences controlling the courthouse and the campaigns that are leading to the courthouse. So it's very important that Democrats especially stand up in Jacksonville and say no more. This is it. Take that kind of campaigning back to South Florida or maybe even out of the state altogether, because here in Jacksonville we have values that are not about corruption and not about undue influence, and are just about governing and being good stewards of the public trust. So that's kind of what I'm up against, and it's so far so good.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. And we have heard that public trust is at the center of many Democrats' campaigns. It's something that we've been talking about a lot, especially as we hear Vice President Biden speak. So with all of that being said, why don't we give our last question to close out to Dr. Duggar. Dr. Duggar, so I ask you this. Considering that our country has been without leadership for the past 4 years, what steps can we take to restore trust in our new top leaders, and how will we measure that there is renewed trust?
Oh, well, I'm kind of a pragmatic person. So I would distribute a survey in every community, have our leaders, our new leaders be out there, be visible, walking neighborhoods, distribute the survey, asking the people what they want. And then come together at town meetings once a month, invite different people, and not just commission meetings, and not have a lot of rules and things that scare a lot of people away, but actually make it transparent, put these real issues on the table, and start helping these people with their real problems in the real neighborhoods. And the things, those kinds of things, is listening, good communication, those kinds of things build trust. And just the opposite of those destroy trust, and we haven't had that in a long time. So start a conversation in our communities, have our leaders come together, and start talking about what we need to do to rebuild and heal our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Duggar, for sharing your vision. Thank you to all of our candidates for joining us tonight. It has been so great to chat with each and every one of you. And thank you so much to our viewers for tuning in and spending your evening with us tonight. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe.